To the Indian Diaspora podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary minds of Indian origin. We have with us today Right Honourable Baroness Verma of Leicester. She is the former Minister of Energy, Climate Change and International Development. She's held several ministerial roles, including serving as Parliamentary Undersecretary of State at the Department of International Development and the Department of Energy and Climate Change. In these roles, she's focused on issues like women's empowerment, sustainable energy, and many other important pressing issues in the world today. As a minister in the Department of Energy and Climate Change, Baroness Verma played a key role in shaping UK's policies on sustainable energy and climate change. Her work contributed to the United Kingdom's effort to transition to a low-carbon economy and address global environmental challenges. During her time at the Department of International Development, she focused on other global issues such as poverty reduction, education, and health as well in developing countries. Her work in this area was aimed at improving the lives of some of the world's most vulnerable populations. So she's also known for her strong advocacy for women's rights and minority communities. She's worked extensively to promote gender equality and has been a vocal supporter of initiatives aimed at empowering women, both in the UK as well as internationally. She is also the former chair of the EU External Affairs Goods Committee and also is currently the president of the all-party parliamentary group, UK and India Trade and Investment. I cannot forget to say that she's the chair of the UN Women as well, which is to me a very strong point for today, which I'd really like to dive into at some point. She's also involved in several campaigns and organizations that support the integration and advancement of minority communities in Britain, if I can put it that way. She continues to be an active member of the House of Lords, where she participates in debates and committees, particularly those related to energy, environment, social justice, and the topics we've spoken about now. Outside of her political career, she is involved in various business ventures and charitable organizations, further contributing to her legacy as a public servant committed to social betterment. I can definitely keep on speaking about all the things that she's achieved, but then let's dive into it and welcome Baroness Verma to our podcast.
Thank you so very much. My goodness. It's great to be with you today, Ameya.
Thank you. Likewise, I'm very excited to talk to you, and I'm sure our viewers will enjoy this podcast a lot. So I would initially, the first thing I would like to ask is, I said a few things, but then I want to know, in your words, how would you explain to us your early days, your childhood, maybe your upbringing, in a sense?
So it's always interesting because people always want to know, how do you become the sort of strong-minded human being that makes you the person you are today. But of course, like all of us, you, me, all of the people that will be listening to this, all of us go on a journey. How we're brought up, the families we're born into, the economic environment that we're born into, all of it shapes the way we are going to end up at some point, right?
Absolutely.
But I suppose my childhood really was in 2, maybe 3 sort of boxes. One being a child of Indian heritage in a very, very white Britain at that time. Second being a girl or a female born into a very, I would say, quite traditional, conservative Indian family in white Britain. So there's your third strand. And then all of those things put together, and you're trying to be an ordinary child growing up, not realizing always that you have to live sort of separate identities because you're fulfilling so many different duties, even though you know that they're not duties. So I suspect, and many of your people that are going to be on this podcast listening today are going to actually probably identify with some of them. Because, we have to culturally satisfy, we have to religiously satisfy, but we also have to satisfy the community that we're living in. Yeah. So how do you manage to navigate all of those things as a kid? And I suspect if I put that question back to you or to your listeners, they'll be sitting there thinking, you know what, actually, how did we do it? And I sometimes sit back and think, how did I do it? But the racism that I experienced as a kid, because, the color of your skin, even especially in a very, very white Britain then, because it wasn't very multicultural, was quite challenging. And then having to live a life of where parents have come from India to the Britain, but they still have their sort of tint of where Indian life, and they want you to sort of live part of it in that lens. So I think I would always say that it was a life where it shaped me to become quite a tough human being very, very early in life, because you are fighting many corners at many times of your life, internally and externally. And I suspect that if that journey had been any different, maybe I wouldn't be who I am today.
Very, very well said. Thank you. Thanks for articulating it so well. I think. Thank you. That immediately brings me to the thought that what brought you into politics? How did you get into this as a career, and probably some things before that that led you to politics?
Yeah, I honestly, Ameya, I don't see politics as a career.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. I see the fact that I am, first of all, I have the privilege of being a public servant, and I am constantly reminding people that when you go to serve, you actually go to serve. So it's an honor and a privilege. But I fell into formal politics, but accidentally, I think. But I actually wanted to be a politician from when I was a very young child.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because of all the things I've articulated earlier, about facing racism. I think the point really came home to me when I was 11 or 12, something like that. And the Ugandan Asians were expelled from Uganda. Mm-hmm. And suddenly in my home city, where there had not been many people of color from my community, suddenly there was a whole community of people just suddenly appear. And a lot of them were traumatized kids. They were kids like me, but they were traumatized.
Yeah.
And I just felt, looking at the way they were treated when they first came, was horrible. People were cruel, they were nasty. And instead of being welcoming to people who had already suffered trauma, actually a lot of it was just horrid, racist behavior. And I think at that point, as I said earlier, you learn either to fight or flight. And I just decided that it wasn't nice or good enough for people to be treated like that. I'd had it. I know what it was like. So I think I sort of started my activism mind. And I say because I wouldn't have known I was an activist.
Right.
At a very, very early age, just trying to make sure that I was there to support people, fight on behalf of people, stand up on behalf of people. And that sort of became my sort of pathway to activism in all different areas. And, I came into politics because, to be quite frank, I just found politics just didn't represent the viewpoint of ordinary people. It didn't matter what color skin you were, they just didn't represent ordinary people.
Yeah, that was a beautiful answer. Thank you. Yeah. how did you do it?
Yeah.
I see that you told us about what led you to this in a sense, but then uh, I also understand that somehow getting to a place that you are right now, or that you were 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it's still for most of us, it could sound like a dream or something. I do understand the that I try to understand the struggles behind it, but then how did you do it? It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I think the driver for me was that, yeah, all of those other things. But I was invited during the pre 99 European elections for candidates from my region. And as a business person, I was invited to go along. And when I got there, I found they couldn't answer a question that I had asked them, not one.
Mhm.
And I'd made a significant decision that when I hit 40,
Mhm.
I was going to go into formal politics. So I sort of live my life in decades. So,
Mhm.
I do certain things at certain junctures in life, hoping that it will set the tone for the next decade.
Right.
And so I decided I was going to go into actually become a member of a political party at the age of 40. What I didn't realize was that a few months later, being invited to this event, that the political party I'd gone and joined would actually invite me to come in and help them shape the party where we needed more inclusion and diversity. So it's
Mhm.
sort of, do you know what they say? Right place, right time, timing.
Perfect.
So I think sometimes, the stars just align, and you end up being in the right place or whatever. And then I had the good fortune to really, really work hard with the party to make them understand the views of minority communities, but also the views of women, and also the views of people from poorer communities. And
Mhm.
that really sort of started to get the narrative changing in the party. So I think when you ask how,
Mhm.
I think sometimes is an alignment naturally,
Right.
but you have to have a will to want to do it.
Absolutely.
That,
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing's going to come on a bus passing you by and you just jump. You have to get on the
Yeah.
bus.
Yeah.
You have to be part of the sort of discussion, and you have to know that you've got to offer something. I
Yep.
always say to people, we spend too much time, talking about negativity, when actually what we really ought to be doing is saying, if it was me, this is the solution I would bring to the table. So I think sometimes the way you approach things also matters. And I've never seen anything as a I see my challenges as opportunities, and then I see my opportunities as solutions. So I look at things in that context always.
Right. Beautifully said. Thank you. Um, so I would like to poke you a little bit on the same thing, but I'm trying to see if there's also other factors that the readers would probably think about. Uh, there's also sometimes probably mentors or probably networks that help us navigate sometimes when there's crossroads. So you don't know, and probably go out and ask help from someone sometimes to get stuff done. Or yeah, sometimes they say it's a godfather or different people, different mentors or something. Do you think there's a role of something like this in your life or in general? How would you?
Oh, I've just been so lucky. I mean, I really have been so lucky that the circle I've mingled in from. You see, the thing is, I think you attract the type of people you are. So
Right.
if you want positivity, then go to people that have positivity. If
Right.
you want ambition, then surround yourself with people who want to be ambitious. So I
Yeah.
think I think the first thing is, I personally say this, I have been really blessed that
Mhm.
the people that have come into my life, even if they were opponents
Mhm.
of what I was trying to do, it enabled me to actually look at them and think, well, maybe to negate your opposition, I need to find somebody equally powerful to be my ally. And I think finding allies and mentors are really critical. I think we sometimes feel we don't want to show that it's a weakness in us, that we need others. I see it as a strength. If I surround myself with very, very clever people, even if I don't know the answer, I know that there's people around me who will. So I think sometimes we can be nervous about being seen to be a little bit vulnerable, but vulnerabilities add to our character, and character is created by other people supporting what you're trying to do. So, I always say to people, never be shy of asking. Never be shy of thinking that you don't know something and that somebody may be able to help you. And never, ever be shy of asking for help.
Wonderful. Very clear. Very
Yeah.
clear.
And so my mentors I have some brilliant mentors. I mean, the party leaders have been my mentors when I first came in. They were very, very strong in supporting what I wanted to see, how I wanted to see it happen, and also about, just supporting me. I had wonderful local mentors, who put me onto committees at a very young age when I was in the regeneration part of regenerating my home city. They wanted a young voice, and they asked me to be the young voice then. Of course, now I'm a senior voice, but I think it was just the fact that I wasn't shy of asking people for support. And I think when you don't ask, when you're not shy, I think then people are more willing to give you the benefit of their knowledge.
Right.
It's up to you to take it or not. I mean, at the end of the day, choices.
Yeah, why not? Nice. That's something I'm sure I'll keep in mind for a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to pick up something from what you said. So what is it that out of curiosity somehow, what is it that you are able to do today that you couldn't do maybe 30 years ago or 25 years ago? In this sense, at this stage, what is it that you are able to influence, or what policy changes can you make? What's that extra power that you have, or however what you would like to answer?
Ameya, let me tell you something about getting older. I mean, you can dread it or embrace it. I hit 65 this year, and I didn't know how I was going to deal with being 65. But then I sat down and I thought, what gift would I like? What gift would I like for myself? And I had a long think about it. And then I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little handbook. And it's a gift to me. That's what it's going to be called, a gift to me. And the gift to me is, what would I have told myself if I was 30 today? And it's going to be a little bit of a sort of humor stroke serious look at myself in a mirror. But to be able to tell that 30-year-old of what I feared when I was 30.
Right.
And I think sometimes, so you asked me, what is it now that I can do that I couldn't maybe 30 years ago, 35 years ago? I think as you get older, you get less concerned about other people's opinion of you. And I just realized that I spent so much of my energy trying to appease or please people's opinion of me. And what that stopped me from doing a lot of the time was being me.
Right.
So I think and the other benefit of getting older is that you get to a place where most people are younger than you. So you can walk into a room knowing that most of the people in the room are going to be younger than you. And so they're going to hopefully value your maturity and your experience.
Right.
But I sort of, as I've got older and as I've reflected on my sort of decade before and the decade before that, I've sort of realized that I spent so much time trying to be the perfect being Whereas really, all I needed to be was the person who enjoyed doing what they wanted to do. And as long as it was a benefit to others and not a harm to others, I really shouldn't have worried about somebody's opinion on me. And I think that's the biggest thing that I will say to anybody listening today, is it's not that I arrogantly would ignore anything. I wouldn't. But I wouldn't also be so preoccupied about somebody else's thought of me, on me, their opinion on me, that I would forget who I was.
Right.
And I think sometimes we end up living in our own shadows.
Yeah.
Because, somebody will tell you, oh, well, you're not tall enough, you're not thin enough, you're not light enough, you're not bright enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough. Well, actually, whatever you are, whichever shape that takes, is you.
Yeah.
And so until I'm happy with myself, how can I make anybody happy? So yeah, I'm getting like my mother. My mother's 85 and really doesn't care about anybody's opinion of her. And I think it's a great strength.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being open about these things. I think there's a lot to learn now in every sentence you've said so far. So thank you. Thank you. If I look at the other side of this, so this as a person and as a as a mother and a daughter, you've said these things. If I look at the same thing in as a person holding certain positions, public positions, or a president of an organization, or let's say the UN Women, being able to influence policy, being able to influence decisions that impact probably thousands, if not millions of people. What is it that today that you can influence? How can you influence these things, and how much more in general power is it, and how do you do it in a sense? It's a little bit of an open question.
Yeah. I look, at the end of the day, like I said, it's an honor to serve. I really just genuinely believe that. And I've literally retired from being UN chair last week. So I did 6 years of it. There's 2 terms, and in the 2 terms, I took an organization through a very big transformational change. It needed to be transformed from its inception to where it is now. And I've handed it over to an incredibly new chair last Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember which day, but it was last week. And it was a great honour to be chair of UN Women's UK National Committee, because it enabled me to be able to work with my board and the executive team to really look at issues that impact women everywhere, not just in the developing nations, but everywhere. So, like looking at safe spaces. Is the workplace fit for purpose for women who may feel vulnerability? Is the sporting arena you go to, or the music venue you go to, or a restaurant you go to, are all of these places fit for purpose for women feeling safe? Is the discussions being had? So we've managed to, as the UK committee, really influence all the other national committees across the UN family. So I think by being able to do those things as interventions, by thinking about the strategy behind it, about how it's rolled out, how the partnerships are built. And remember, nothing's ever done without partners, without collaborating with people, without looking at how governments can be supportive. So, those things really can change. And I always say to people, you may only think you make a very small difference, but if that small difference is a multiplier effect, it becomes a huge difference. So, please join organizations. I mean, I was headhunted into UN Women UK. I'm being asked to look at other organizations as I speak. I am involved in a number of initiatives around gender equality, looking at domestic abuse. And I think unless you're in it, you cannot change it. And so yes, I think the fact that I've been able to be a part of a sea change on looking at various things around the safety of women
Absolutely.
is really important.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very inspiring and obviously very promising to listen to as well. But I have a follow-up question based on what you said. So in the last couple of weeks or even months, there have been many incidents that have been coming to light. Just before the Olympics, there was an Australian woman who was, brutally assaulted, and there was another event in Sweden, broad daylight, and now there are protests happening in India because of a medical professional. I see in many ways that yeah, it's I don't know if it's statistically if it's increasing, decreasing, but then or more is coming to light now because of media or things like that. But the whole point is how can we help women uh, probably protect them, or I mean or help change the situation before the damage happens. It's very frequent these days, and no, they're saying about 25%, 30% of, let's say, if we're looking at the EU or UK as well, about 33% of the women at some point of time in their lives have experienced some kind of sexual abuse or things like that. What is it that we can do in, yeah.
So let's ask the question differently.
Yeah.
Let's ask the question in a way where, let's look at some of the reasons why these things are happening. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, domestic abuse, sexual violence against women. I mean, the stats have not changed very much for decades. So, in this country, in the UK, 1 in 4 still remains 1 in 4. 25 years ago, it was 1. I mean, it just remains. Maybe the reporting is better now, but it's still 1 in 4 women will be of some sort of abuse. And 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 men. So it's not just women, it is men too. Right? So there's the first thing that we need to. Yeah. The second thing is globally is 1 in 3. Right? Which is again a nasty statistic, right? Then we look at, every week 2 women will be killed or harmed by at the hands of a partner. Every week. So the stats haven't really improved. But I'll tell you what hasn't improved is our discussion around why we haven't been able to change our debate about how men and women, boys and girls, are looking at the challenges they face. Now, we want to make sure that women's positions are of equal opportunity, of equity, are there. But our debate isn't also about saying, but that's not about displacing boys and men. It should be about saying that we're just finding space for both to be able to sit in the same space. And so I think our debates have been wrong. We have not managed to actually make boys and men feel secure enough to be able to face the challenges that then lead to this sort of constant battle with each other. And I think that's educational. I think it's nurturing. The sports system should start very early on. I think, the problem we have now is we have more women than ever wishing to get into higher education, going on to be professionals. But we've not had a look at how that's had a social, cultural impact on communities. And how do we make sure that the balance is then okay for both to be able to have equal responsibilities at home as well. Equal, let's not degrade the fact that somebody stays at home, whether it's man or woman. We have to shape our debates differently. And because we've become nuclear families that have become even sort of semi-nuclear to nuclear, the wider networks that we had as security blankets have disappeared. So again, it's a societal thing, it's a cultural thing. But the debate itself, what it was 25, 30, 40 years ago, has not really changed. And I think we need to have those really honest discussions. What makes boys feel that they need to behave in a certain way, and make them feel comfortable that actually being respectful, being able to work and coexist alongside women is not a difficult, challenging thing, is a natural, normal thing. But then how do we make those debates feel normal? And I think the same applies to the discussion the other way.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have that. I just think that our discussions have not kept up with change. And technology, of course, is a good thing and a bad thing. Because when you want to feed on the vulnerable mind, technology, sadly, also can feed on the negativity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is a very complicated, very complex area. But I always say to people, if we get it right by starting supporting families when families start, and giving them the added value of knowing what an extended family strength is, whether it's a granny or a granddad, whether it's an auntie or an uncle, whether it's your neighbours, that extra little layer of support actually helps you become a much more rounded human being.
Very clear, very interesting. Thank you. Thanks for the answer. If I broaden this slightly to take it towards also talking about diversity and let's say minorities, people of color, or any kind of difference in complex maybe superiority and inferiority ideas. So probably if most people get let's say similar opportunities in life, regardless of their age or any of these factors contributing to diversity, it would probably get much better in many ways for all of us. And why I'm saying this is probably it's in most of the places, at least the places that we live in, it's probably the third generation of people, let's say brown people here, and we're still debating the same things. And in some cases, and correct me if I'm wrong, with probably many aspects of discrimination, we're probably even going backwards, and we see in some places extremism rising or something like that. So again, I would really like your comments on this, or any discuss.
So, in recent days in the UK, we had riots, and they sort of lifted the lid on a lot of uncomfortable discussion.
Yeah.
Why do people feel the way they're feeling? And why are these debates, when they're had, so polarizing that nobody wants to have them? Yeah. And I always say, look, I grew up in the UK when there were very few people of color here. But I have worn the color of my skin and my gender with pride.
Yeah.
Because I think the first thing you've got to do is to be able to take ownership of what you are.
Right.
I have never looked at the color of my skin as an excuse for it to be a barrier. Now, that doesn't discard the fact that there are barriers. That doesn't discard the fact that I probably have to accept that there will be times when I will be overlooked many times over for being a person of color or being a female. But I'm not going to let it hold me back. Because if I spend all my time having to think about, well, these are all barriers and everything's going to change, nothing's going to happen, then actually all the opportunities that are out there still existing, they will get missed.
Yeah.
And I keep saying to people, we should, first of all, I always say I was privileged enough to be born in Amritsar.
Right.
I was privileged enough to be born in a country which is so diverse, so rich in culture, so full of so many things that are contradiction of terms, but also full of beauty and history. But they went through their own journey. And 78 years later, they celebrated 78 years of independence. They've gone through a journey and they've come into a point where now they're the fourth or the fifth largest economy on the planet in India.
Yeah.
So when people say to me, oh, we're bound to be discriminated against, if that's the mindset you're going to go in with, then sadly, that's what's going to happen. And I think the more we understand that, yes, we may face some different challenges, and those different challenges are uncomfortable, but unless we have a discussion about them, unless we're open to being part of the communities that we've gone to, then those challenges don't disappear.
Yeah.
What is it? The 10 top CEOs on the planet all look like you and me, Ameya.
Yeah.
So let's not limit ourselves. I mean, I always say I look at my color and I look at my gender and I look at the fact that I'm still achieving,
Right.
despite
Yeah.
the fact that there may be challenges out there. And every time I see a challenge, I see it as an opportunity, and the opportunity then becomes something that I embrace to change.
Right. Very interesting perspectives. Thank you. If we, since it's an Indian diaspora podcast, I'm always tempted to ask you, how do you keep tabs on what's probably happening in India and ground realities in India? Are you probably connected to some of the probably policymakers or politicians or people doing work on ground in India? Because how you've influenced policies in the western part of the world and a lot of things. How do we do it in another country, especially in a developing nation like India and something that's so diverse, just like you mentioned? If there's any progress if you see any progress in the last 10, 20 years or so, or yeah.
So and that's a really interesting one because, first of all, we're connected with India through our heritage. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I'm connected through birth. My husband is connected through birth. Mm-hmm. And we regularly go to India. My husband chairs a very large charity there for tribal children, which we relish because we are giving an opportunity to kids who may never have education otherwise. Right. So that's a great connector for us. And because I'm the president of the all-party parliamentary group of trade and investment with India, mm-hmm. We do a lot of partnership work with our counterparts in India. So, we did a delegation last year. We're looking to do a delegation this year. And it's all about trade and investment. Of course, you end up meeting people that are going to seek to see what you're doing, and is it the same as what's happening in India? Are they doing something differently? Are they doing something better? How can we learn? There are great opportunities, I feel, that are often underutilized, and that's the university to university relationships. Right. Where student experiences really do go on as the biggest soft power we have. Mm-hmm. So I think there's lots of things that help shape different perspectives. I don't go to shape anybody's policy. What I do try to do is to see how we strengthen relationships, so that we can have those honest debates and discussions, mm-hmm. where we may agree, disagree. Mm-hmm. I have been, I've been encouraging businesses from the UK to go in and partner and invest in India. I take Indian businesses and help them invest in the UK. So yes. I think all of those relationships, different as they are, but they're all good relationships. I'm a practical human being. My job isn't to shape some other country's political landscape. Mm-hmm. My job is to make sure that our relationship in the country that I've now been in literally all my life has a good, strong relationship, not just with India, but globally.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, just to add a little bit to this, how do you see the evolution of British-India relations over the years? Or if you, I don't know if it's the right way to ask, but what if there are some key moments or policies that you think have shaped the current state of this relationship?
So I think to be quite frank, I think we've not done enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think
No.
you know, as India was growing, we didn't sort of grow our relationship strongly enough
Mm-hmm.
with India. I think it's it's sometimes missed opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
but I think now the realization is that you cannot have a discussion without having to think about that region, actually, India
Mm-hmm.
and the region, because the
Right.
Indo-Pacific region is becoming incredibly dynamic. It's growing incredibly fast. So I think we need to also reset how we think our relationships in the West should be with the Indo-Pacific,
Right.
in particular India, as the largest partner there. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I think there's a lot of conversations that haven't been had. I think there's been a lack of real understanding about the growth story, and I think also, you know, and I hate to say this, but the sort of misinformation that is constantly
Yes.
peddled on social media about developing countries in that region is very unhelpful, because it causes unnecessary tensions where tensions don't need to exist. And the
Right.
reality is, on the ground, when you go on the ground, which we do regularly, the reality is very different,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So I think social media needs to take some responsibility for some of the misinformation it peddles. And I think, for us in the UK, the couple of weeks ago when the riots happened and a lot
Yeah.
of misinformation was being all over social media, demonstrated how dangerous it was.
Right.
Mm.
Right. Right. Yeah. Very clear. In this regard, do you think the diaspora, as such, the Indian diaspora, let's say in the UK or the EU, their contributions, or are there areas where I mean, I'm sure they've done a lot of work. I see a lot of big names, especially in the UK. Are there areas where the diaspora can play an even more, let's say, a pivotal role in strengthening bilateral ties, or in making this better, let's say, catching
Yeah.
up on missed opportunities?
Oh, undoubtedly, the Indian diaspora across the world
Mhm.
has been such a strength for India. The remittances that have been sent by the
Mhm.
diaspora have helped India's growth story. And I think, if you look at some of the hospitals that exist today in India,
Mhm.
but because of the strength of the American Indian diaspora, right?
Mhm.
So, and
Yeah.
I know now, even from the UK, there's some phenomenal medics that have gone to India and
Mhm.
set up there. So I
Right.
think the strength of diaspora has been that the diaspora never left its connectivity with India.
Right. Yeah.
But the sad thing was that the diaspora didn't feature strongly enough for India.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
think that relationship on the other side has now begun to make those messages, those discussions a bit clearer, that the diaspora matters.
Right. Right.
And I think there were two parts to this, Ameya. One was that originally the people that had come first generation, maybe even second generation, did not have the political or the economical will,
Mhm.
strength, to
Yeah.
be able to be of as great an importance
Yes.
as it is today. So I think there's a shift there. I
Mhm.
also think that the fact that the diaspora's second, third, fourth generations
Right.
are, their relationship with India is very different.
Right.
And so I think that relationship is also adding to the value add that the diaspora bring. because that relationship is really important for two reasons. Soft power, the understanding of, if you're in Holland or if you're in the UK or if wherever you are in the world, in America, the diaspora has a particular soft space for India relationships. And those countries will draw on that understanding. So India needs to draw on that understanding too, because that's the way those relationships become much stronger. I also think that because we have that understanding, it enables us as the diaspora to sometimes see off the misinformation that is spread about India.
Right.
So I think that those conversations are two-way. I think, we as the diaspora, I always say to people, we never left our connectivity. Yes. India's just, in recent years, has rediscovered the closeness of that connectivity. And now I think there's a real value to making sure that those living bridges that we have actually become stronger.
Right. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Beautifully said.
I mean, I love India. I went to India the first time when I was 16 years old, and I have been to India every year ever since.
Wow, very nice to hear. Thank you. A slightly different topic, also, which you're an expert with energy, climate change. So we've really worked. There's a lot of work going on reducing carbon footprint and moving towards renewables and renewable energy storage. How do you see the developing countries catch up to this? Countries closer to the equator, which could not probably use up as much as coal or natural gas when the Industrial Revolution was happening in the West. And right now they're trying to catch up, but then if we push them too much towards using only renewables, then they'd probably be left behind a little bit as well. I'm just throwing in ideas here, but I'd just like to know your perspective, how we can somehow help them achieve net zero as well. So
here's my take on this.
Yeah,
because this is really close to my heart. One, because my son's business is in renewable energy.
Wow, okay.
Secondly, do you know, my passion is for the African continent with all of its natural resources to be able to have its rightful place in the world. Now, that is because, to be quite frank, yes, they didn't have the old infrastructure, thank goodness. Yes, they haven't used fossil fuels as much, thank goodness. They are blessed with being near the equator and having actual God-gifted sunlight regularly.
Right.
So the question I want to pose to all of those who have constantly said, oh, well, the African continent is developing and it's poor, is why have we not, in our support over decades, helped support an energy system that was not reliant on fossil fuels? And, the question to me is always, how is it that we think that they need to have fossil fuel injection when actually they just need support in building support for regular solar, hydro, wind energies, because they have beautiful abundance of all. And I think the discussions really are in how we have decided to be able to develop those nations without actually asking them how they wanted to be developed, really. Now, that isn't a fault line. Of course, it means that it's just a discussion for ourselves to have, is maybe we've just not been looking at it with the right lens.
Right.
So maybe we should just reshape our own way. Yes. I mean, I'm a strong believer that trade is better than aid. Economic development is better than, just development. 3-year programs are never any good when you are not having a sustainable business plan in place. So for me, it's really about changing the whole approach to where you go to develop their ability to those countries' ability to be able to grow. You know, I know people often sort of talk about China and Africa, but China took the decision to go to Africa. Yes, it's now got a lot of the needy minerals and resources that the world needs, you know, cobalt, lithium, all of these things. But, you know, we all have choices, and we all had choices. And I think when we sit down and rethink strategy, the one thing I think we should all rethink is that Africa itself has now got the youngest population on the planet. It is going to rise to 2.5 billion people by 2040, 2050. Most of that population is going to be under 35. How are we going to use that fabulous resource to build up the continent?
Right.
And how are we going to look at the natural? They have fabulous agriculture, they have fabulous fruit, vegetables, but they cannot preserve it because of wastage. So instead of doing to your point, Ameya, my point to Africa or to developing nations, whether it's in South America, whether it's in Africa, wherever a developing nation is, let's not superimpose a model that does not fit.
Yeah.
Let us look and de-thread what it is that makes that individual country work for itself. And then how do we as collaborators, as partnerships, support it?
As someone involved in many ways with energy in international relations as well, what future opportunities do you see between Britain and India, particularly in these areas, probably climate change, technology, trade, something? I mean, any of these?
There is so much. I mean, look, technology is moving so quickly. You know, it's in our interests, in all of our interests, regardless of whether you're a first world country or a third world country, to look at how technology is going to impact on you, your security of your country, you know, on the way businesses run, the way businesses are operating, on how actually you're going to be able to access technology first and foremost. And I was talking to somebody very recently about fiber optics wall to wall in some countries, you know, but even that is changing now. You know, the sort of satellite dishes sitting up in the clouds and all sorts of things going on. So I think actually it's going to be easier to be able to help developing nations develop, as long as you put in the right support mechanisms for them to develop. So for me, you know, trade with India is on several fronts because we share so many challenges together.
Yeah.
And we also share so many commonalities of, well, language is one, but education systems, legal systems are others. So why don't we actually work closer together and look at how we can collaborate? As I said earlier, I'm a great supporter of student relationships with students and universities and research papers in innovator hubs, you know, in centers of excellence. There is just so much to do.
Absolutely.
And I think the discussions are as limited as you want them to be if you limit yourself.
Right. What advice would you like to give to, let's say, younger people who would like to take the baton from people like you, who are aspiring to be not only in, probably also in politics or in decision-making roles, but also to grow in their respective fields, let's say in the UK or in the EU? And yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I think never fear what you want to do. You see, the thing that stops most people is fear of failure.
Right.
And the one thing that I learned from my son, who spent 5 years in America, was that failure is not a bad thing. It's just another learning curve. So, you know, when we fail, sometimes you fail badly, but you know, it's an opportunity to sit back, reevaluate, reassess what you did wrong and what you don't need to do again. So I think never fear it. Never fear asking the question that you think is stupid, but everybody else wants to ask it too. I mean, have you ever been in a meeting where you want to ask it and you think, no, I don't want it because it sounds pretty stupid? But now I've been doing it for such a long time now that I just say, look, I'm going to ask the question I think everybody wants to ask, but they all think it's a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it. Sure. So I think fear of not looking stupid, because it doesn't matter. You can be the judge of yourself. Right. It's better to say something than to stay silent. It's better to be someone than to be no one.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's better to just sometimes forget the fact that somebody else might have an opinion on you doing what you're doing, but your own opinion should be the most important one for you. So I think I often say, you know, things hold you back because you hold yourself back. And as long as I don't harm anybody on my own pursuit, and as long as I don't harm somebody in my own pursuit, I will do my own pursuit.
Yeah. There you go. That's like a full circle from the first question when you said you look back 30 years, 25 years. Yes.
Have fun. Enjoy life. It's too short to be serious all the time.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, people say, what do you do when you're not doing politics? I said, well, I'm usually doing something else, making somebody else think that they can do it. Because, you know, in life, when you just sit back and, you know, think that, you know, I'm going to go to my maker one day, and if at the door the question is asked, what are you the most proudest of? My proudest moment will be that I never stopped trying.
Beautiful. Yeah.
No time for retirement, Ameya.
Right. Well, I'll keep that in mind. How do you pass on the baton to the next, as in what do you think the next generation should do, or how do we give it to them, basically?
Nobody gives you anything, Ameya. Just remember, nobody gives you anything. And if you're not prepared to go and get it, I remember I said, the bus is coming. If you're not on it, it'll just pass you by. So I always think that we shouldn't. Why do we need to wait for somebody to give something to us? Yeah. I had a dream at 11. It was a school essay. My mother has kept it in her attic, that I wanted to be Prime Minister. But I wanted to be Prime Minister of India because I didn't think I could be Prime Minister of this country at 11, because I didn't see anybody of colour, and the only person I saw at an 11-year-old was the Prime Minister of India, which was Indira Gandhi. Right. And so I didn't know that I couldn't be Prime Minister of India, but I also didn't know I could be Prime Minister of this country. Right. So I think, you know, sometimes if you don't dream big enough or want something hard enough, then don't expect it to happen.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I always say to people, the power is in your hands. If you want something, you will find ways, legal, lawful ways of achieving them.
Right.
But surround yourself with people that will encourage you rather than discourage you.
Very good. Thank you. Before I close, I want to ask you, if, let's say there's an opportunity to have all the diaspora, Indian diaspora people in front of you, if there was something you wanted to, you had an opportunity to tell them, would there be something you'd say?
I would say to them, I am so privileged and so proud to belong to a diaspora that is so global, so hardworking. Predominantly wherever the Indian diaspora has gone, they have given so much to the communities and to the country that they've gone into. They've enriched it, they've contributed to it, they've integrated into it. And to be quite frank, we should be so proud of our achievements, because it's not because of anything but ourselves. We ourselves are responsible for that. And I think if there was the whole diaspora in front of me, I would say to them, feel proud that you, the people that have come before you, and the massive shoulders that came before them, on whose shoulders all of us have managed to do what we're doing, we should be so, so proud. And never let anybody tell you otherwise. Because the minute you doubt your own strength and your own contribution, you allow others to actually degrade what the wider diaspora has given.
Yes. Thank you. It's very inspiring. Thank you. Is there anything you wish I had asked, or if you think...
Oh, listen, 65 years of life, you can't condense it in an hour, I'm afraid, Ameya. But it's always good fun to be able to have the platform. You know, I'm a politician, I can talk for hours. You know, the problem for me is I can't talk for hours. But it's been a real honor and privilege to be able to reach out to people somewhere across the world that I don't know. But we're joined through history.
That was a pleasure, and I hope the next time I can do a follow-up on specific energy or women's rights, full interview on that, probably live sitting in front of you. So thank you. That was special, and that was very interesting to listen to your perspectives and your life. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and thank you to all your listeners.
Thank you.